2019, New York City. The city that never sleeps was about to witness a story so strange, so unbelievable, that the FBI would still be studying it years later. It all started with a statistic most people would forget by the next day. The NYPD had lost $247 million in art theft in a single year. But what no one saw coming was that the person who would change everything wasn't a hardened detective or an elite FBI profiler. It was a 27-year-old cowgirl from Texas, Sarah Tex Mitchell, in a black thoroughbred with haunted eyes named Storm. Sarah stood in front of the NYPD's massive Midtown precinct, suitcase in one hand, her Texas sheriff's badge packed away deep in her bag, heart pounding as the yellow cab screamed past and the smell of roasted peanuts drifted on the wind. She was supposed to be tough. After all, she was Austin County's rodeo champion 3 years running, daughter of the legendary Sheriff Mitchell. But here, with skyscrapers blotting out the sky, she felt like a tiny insect in a land of giants. That first day was a blur. The uniforms were a strange blue, not the tan she grew up with. The precinct was a living thing, buzzing with chaos, voices barking orders and accents she'd only ever heard in movies. When she was shown to her apartment, a shoebox with a window the size of a paperback, barely enough space for a bed, she locked the door, pulled out a faded photo of her family's ranch, and let the tears come. What have I done? I don't belong here. It wasn't just the city, it was her new assignment. The NYPD mounted unit, once the pride of the city, was now under scrutiny. And her new partner was notorious for all the wrong reasons. Storm, 8 years old, jet black, a muscle-bound legend with a past darker than his coat. Once, he was the parade favorite, the show-off, the horse everyone wanted. That was before the Bronx drug bust, before everything changed. The story was whispered in the stables, never in front of the brass. Officer Jake Rodriguez, beloved by all, fearless in the field, was gunned down during a midnight operation. Storm, his loyal partner, saw it all. Something snapped in the horse that night. Since then, he'd attacked 3 officers, nearly trampled a groom, and no one wanted to ride him. But the department, desperate to rehabilitate its image, saw Sarah, the outsider, the rodeo queen, as their last hope. Sarah entered the stable, boots echoing on concrete. The smell of hay, leather, and nervous sweat filled the air. Storm's stall was at the very end, isolated. As she approached, he whirled around, nostrils flaring, ears pinned back. She froze, remembering every lesson her father taught her. Never show fear, never turn your back, but respect the animal's pain. She spoke softly, her Texan drawl out of place among the gruff city voices. "Storm, easy boy. I'm not here to hurt you." He pawed the ground, snorted, and watched her with a gaze that felt almost human. She wondered if he remembered Jake, if he blamed her for being the next in a long line of strangers. But there was something about Storm that felt off. Not just anger, intelligence, a kind of restless focus she'd only ever seen in the most brilliant rodeo horses. When she tried to clip on his lead, he jerked his head, nearly knocking her off her feet. She stumbled, heart pounding, cheeks burning as the stable hands snickered. One muttered, "You'll last a week." That night, in her tiny apartment, Sarah couldn't sleep. Sirens screamed below her window, and every sound made her flinch. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old messages from her dad. "You can do this, Sarah. Mitchell's never quit." She wanted to believe it, but the city felt like it was swallowing her whole. The next morning, she arrived at the precinct's briefing room, badge heavy on her chest. Captain Maria Vasquez, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like broken glass, eyed her up and down. 2 weeks, Mitchell, that's all you get. If Storm so much as sneezes wrong, you're both gone. She wanted to snap back, to tell them she was more than a PR stunt. But as she sat down, she caught Detective Tommy O'Brien, Jake's old partner, glaring at her. She's going to get herself killed just like... Never mind. The words hung in the air, icy and cruel. Sarah's jaw clenched. She refused to cry in front of them. That afternoon, she took Storm out for a test ride through Central Park. Tourists stared, cameras flashed, but Storm ignored them all, muscles tense, every step a battle of wills. At the Bethesda fountain, Storm suddenly jerked his head, staring intently at a group of street artists setting up easels. He let out a low, rumbling noise, almost a growl. Sarah pulled him back, but he dug in, refusing to move. It was the first sign that something was different. But Sarah couldn't see the pattern yet. All she knew was that Storm was agitated, unpredictable, and she was alone. As the sun set behind Manhattan's jagged skyline, Sarah led Storm back to the stable. She noticed a shadow moving in the alley across the street, lingering just long enough to send chills down her spine. She shook it off. Probably nothing. But as she turned away, the shadow raised a phone to its ear. "She's here." The voice was low, deliberate. She doesn't know what Jake found, but the horse does. Back in her room, Sarah stared at the photo of the ranch again, hand trembling. "I made a mistake. I'm not cut out for this." But then, a memory flashed. Her father's hand on her shoulder, his words steady as stone. "Sometimes, Sarah, you gotta ride into the storm, not away from it." She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would try again. What Sarah didn't know was that Storm wasn't just Jake's partner. Jake had been training Storm for something no one else in the department understood: art crime detection. He'd stumbled onto a web of corruption so deep he paid for it with his life. And now, Storm was trying to tell Sarah the secret that got Jake killed. But would she listen before it was too late? Sarah woke up before dawn, the city's chaos pressing in even through her apartment's paper-thin walls. She barely slept, nerves stretched tight after her first day. Today was the real test. As she pulled on her uniform, she forced herself to remember the feeling of home, the warm sun over Texas fields, her father's steady words. Now, everything felt colder. The linoleum floor, the hard mattress, even her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. For a moment, she wondered if she was already in over her head. Downstairs, the precinct was buzzing, murmurs, radios, coffee brewing, sneakers squeaking on polished floors. She grabbed a cup, barely tasted it, and headed straight for the stables. The grooms gave her a quick nod but kept their distance. She heard them whispering, placing bets on how long the cowgirl would last. She ignored them, walking determinedly to Storm's stall. The horse stood tall, black coat glistening in the weak morning light. His ears flicked as she approached, but for a brief second he didn't flinch. "Hey boy, let's show them, huh?" Her voice trembled, but she pushed the fear down, slipping a sugar cube into her palm. Storm eyed her, snorted, and for a moment took the treat gently. Small victories, she thought. That morning's briefing was different. The room was heavy. Even the city's background noise seemed muted. Captain Vasquez's face was drawn, eyes sharper than ever. "Art theft. Midtown. We lost a Monet replica, valued at over $2 million. Scene's a circus already." "You," she pointed at Sarah, "and O'Brien, you're first on it, and take the horse." Murmured chuckles filled the room, but Sarah held her head high. Detective O'Brien met her outside, arms folded, mouth set in a grim line. His accent thick, his eyes hard. "Let's get one thing straight. I only work with you because I have to. And that horse? He's a liability, not an asset." Sarah almost snapped back. Almost. Instead, she just met his glare with her own, jaw tight. "Let's just get the job done, detective." He scoffed, but she caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Grief, maybe. Or just exhaustion. The ride to the crime scene was tense. Sirens, streetlights blurring by, the city already alive with horns and yelling. Sarah led Storm out into the early sunlight, crowds gathering as soon as they saw the NYPD uniform and the big black horse. O'Brien pushed past, ducking under police tape. "Stay out of my way." The gallery was chaos. Flashbulbs, tourists, a harried owner nearly in tears. Sarah tried to calm Storm as she took in the scene. Shattered glass, alarms still wailing, paint chips glittering on the marble floor. Storm shifted his weight, nostrils flaring, head turning sharply toward a spot near the back wall. Sarah felt him tense. Easy boy. She followed his gaze. There, hidden beneath a velvet rope, was a faint, sticky residue on the floor. O'Brien was busy shouting at the owner, missing it completely. Storm's agitation grew. He began pawing at the marble, letting out a deep, anxious whinny. Sarah knelt, ignoring the stares, and examined the spot. The residue had a faint, bitter smell, almost like pine and something chemical. She scraped a sample into an evidence bag, just as O'Brien turned around, scowling. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice cut off as Storm whirled, nostrils wide, eyes fixed on a dark van idling across the street. Sarah felt a chill. For a split second, she thought she saw a glint of metal behind the tinted window. The van pulled away fast, melting into city traffic. She couldn't be sure. Was it paranoia or something more? O'Brien barked, "Leave the forensics to the experts, Mitchell. Your job is to handle the animal." Sarah bit back a retort. Storm, meanwhile, refused to calm, still staring at the now empty curb. By noon, the gallery was swarming with detectives, lab techs, even an FBI art crime specialist who barely glanced at Sarah. She felt the weight of being an outsider, the city pressing in with its 1,000 unsaid rules. She led Storm away, trying to keep him calm, but inside she felt just as out of place. On the way back to the precinct, crowds snapped photos. Some kids yelled, "Nice horse, cowgirl!" She forced a smile. Lunch in the precinct cafeteria was a lonely affair. Sarah sat alone, picking at cold macaroni, while O'Brien and the other detectives clustered at another table. Their laughter sounded sharp, cutting. She tried not to listen, but O'Brien's voice drifted over. "She's gonna get herself killed. Just like... Never mind." The words stabbed deeper than she expected. She looked down, suddenly aware of how small she felt here, how invisible. Meanwhile, in the alley outside, the van from the gallery had returned. Inside, a figure in a dark jacket adjusted a camera lens, watching Sarah through the window. The equipment was top shelf, more suited for espionage than street crime. A phone buzzed. The figure spoke quietly, eyes never leaving Sarah. "She's getting too close. She has the horse. We need to act before they put it all together." That afternoon, Sarah was called into Captain Vasquez's office. The captain's desk was stacked with files, her tone clipped. "You've got 2 weeks, Mitchell. The horse is your responsibility. If anything goes wrong, and I mean anything, you're both gone." "Do I make myself clear?" Sarah nodded, fists clenched at her sides. "Crystal, ma'am." She left the office with her head held high, but inside, doubt gnawed at her. Am I really making any difference here? Or am I just waiting to fail? She spent the rest of the afternoon with Storm, grooming him in the quiet of the stables. For a while, it almost felt like home. The steady rhythm of the brush, the horse's warm breath, the smell of hay. She spoke softly, letting her thoughts spill out. "I know you've lost someone too. I know it hurts. Maybe we're both just trying to survive." As dusk settled over the city, Sarah took Storm for one last walk around the precinct. The air was cooler, the city lights just flickering on. As they rounded the block, she felt a prickle on her neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. She turned sharply, catching a glimpse of the van parked half a block away. For a heartbeat, their eyes met through the glass, a stranger's face, blank and unreadable. The van pulled away again, but the feeling lingered. Back in the stable, Sarah tried to shake the unease. She finished brushing Storm and lingered for a moment, watching the city skyline from the small window. Somewhere out there, someone was watching her. The stakes were higher than she realized, and she had no idea just how much danger she was really in. Later, as she locked her apartment door, her phone buzzed. A new message from her father. "You got this, Tex. Remember, the only way out is through." She smiled, but the comfort faded quickly. Lying in bed, the sounds of the city all around, she wondered how long she could keep this up. In the shadows, the watcher made another call. She's digging. If she finds out what Jake knew, if that horse leads her to the truth, we'll have to shut it down. For good. The voice on the other end was calm, authoritative. Wait for my signal. But remember, no loose ends. Sarah drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams haunted by galloping hooves, city lights, and the flash of a gun in the darkness. She didn't know it yet, but the real hell was just beginning, and everyone in the city would soon learn exactly what a cowgirl and a crazy horse could do when the world turned against them. The next morning, Sarah's alarm rang out at 5:15 a.m., slicing through the restless fragments of her sleep. Her mind kept replaying the strange events from the gallery, the van, and most of all, Storm's unsettling behavior. It felt like every day in New York City chipped away a little more of her Texas steel, but today, something was different. She was determined not to be pushed out, not by a city, not by a police force that doubted her, and certainly not by fear. She arrived at the stables before sunrise, breathing in the sharp, cool air. The city was quieter this early, the traffic muted, the world not yet in motion. Storm greeted her with his usual guarded glare, but he didn't shy away when she opened the stall. Sarah offered her palm, this time with 2 sugar cubes, and felt a strange comfort as the horse gently took them. For a second it felt like a tiny thread of trust was being woven between them. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text from Detective O'Brien. Another hit last night. Uptown, big one, meet at the 79th Street Precinct ASAP. The words made her stomach drop. She hurried to tack up Storm. Despite his reputation, she insisted on riding him to every scene. If she was going to make this work, she had to trust him. And maybe, just maybe, he'd trust her back. As they rode through Central Park, the city waking up around them, Sarah let herself notice how Storm seemed more alert than usual. His ears flicked at every sound, his stride eager. It was almost as if he knew what was coming. The second crime scene was even bigger than the first. Police tape fluttered in the morning breeze outside a stately brownstone-turned private gallery. Reporters clustered on the sidewalk, their cameras turning from the building to Sarah as she arrived. A cowgirl on a black horse cutting a surreal figure amid the suits and uniforms. She ignored the flashbulbs and walked Storm toward the entrance, O'Brien meeting her with an unreadable expression. Van Gogh this time, a sketch worth $5 million, gone. O'Brien's voice was hoarse, dark circles under his eyes. Same MO as the Monet, alarm tripped for less than a minute, but the thief was in and out, no trace. Sarah scanned the foyer, letting Storm walk slowly behind her. The marble floors gleamed, the walls lined with empty frames. At first, nothing seemed out of place, until Storm suddenly stopped dead. Hooves clattering. He began to paw at a specific spot, the exact same way he had at the Monet scene. Sarah crouched down, examining the floor. Once again, there was a faint, almost invisible residue. She sniffed. Pine and something chemical. O'Brien came over, frowning. What's the horse doing? But before he could finish, Sarah interrupted. He's found something again. Same spot, same reaction as yesterday. O'Brien scoffed, but Sarah pulled out her phone and snapped a photo, bagging another sample for the lab. Sarah looked at Storm. He was staring intently at the floor, nostrils flaring, muscles taut. She ran her hand down his neck, whispering, "You're trying to tell me something. Aren't you, boy?" Inside the lab, the samples from both scenes were rushed through analysis. The report came back in the afternoon. The substance was damar varnish, a rare kind of resin used only in certain high-end art restorations and in forgeries. Sarah's mind raced. It wasn't just that Storm was noticing a smell. He was noticing the specific varnish at both scenes, and at the exact spot the thief had used to enter or exit. She stayed late at the precinct that day, poring over old case files in a dusty corner. The other officers ignored her, and even O'Brien seemed to keep his distance, still wary after her repeated insistence that Storm was onto something real. As night fell, Sarah's mind pieced together a wild theory. What if Jake Rodriguez, Storm's old partner, hadn't just been a beat cop? What if he'd been working a case within the department? Something so secret it got him killed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats in the corridor. She looked up, surprised to see Storm had managed to untether himself from his stall and wandered to her. For a second she braced for chaos, but instead Storm lowered his head, letting her stroke his muzzle. Sarah smiled for the first time all day. "Maybe we can help each other heal," she whispered, almost not believing she'd said it aloud. With Storm by her side, she decided to dig deeper. She tracked down Jake's training logs, his notes, anything that might connect him to the art thefts. Hidden in the back of a filing cabinet, she found a battered black notebook labeled Storm Olfactory. In Jake's handwriting, the notes were meticulous, tests of Storm's ability to identify different scents, especially art materials. Jake had documented that Storm's sense of smell far exceeded any police canine, especially when it came to Damar varnish. Sarah's heart pounded. Jake had discovered Storm's unique ability long before he died. The conclusion at the bottom of the page hit her like a freight train. Storm can detect varnish at 1000x, lower concentration than any machine tested. If he reacts, it means a crime is in progress. She flipped the page, a final entry, hurried and almost frantic. Storm knows, if anything happens to me, trust the horse. The evidence is in the patterns. The realization settled over her. Jake had been onto something big. He'd trained Storm for this. That's why Storm had been so aggressive since Jake's death. He'd witnessed the murder and understood more than anyone realized. Sarah was suddenly certain Jake hadn't died by accident. He was silenced for getting too close. Her phone vibrated. A lab tech with the results. "Mitchell, you need to see this. No human could have picked up this level of varnish. Whatever you're doing with that horse, keep doing it." Sarah hung up, her mind racing. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a revelation. But with every answer came a darker question. If Jake had been killed for discovering Storm's ability, was she next? That night, Sarah walked Storm around the block, her eyes searching every shadow, every moving van, every face lingering a bit too long. She felt exposed, watched, but she refused to back down. She thought of her father's words, her Texas roots, and how quitting was never an option. After stabling Storm, Sarah took a moment to brush him down. For the first time, he didn't flinch when she touched his flank. Their eyes met. Two survivors in a city full of ghosts. "We're in this together now, partner, whatever it takes." Outside, in a dark sedan parked just down the street, the watcher snapped photos of Sarah and Storm, sending them to an unknown number. "She's getting too close," the watcher whispered into the phone. "Should we proceed?" A pause, then a chilling answer. "Let her find one more clue. Then we shut it down for good." Sarah went to bed that night with her mind spinning, her heart pounding, and Storm's warning neigh echoing in her dreams. She was closer to the truth than ever, and in more danger than she could possibly imagine. But she knew one thing: she wouldn't run. Not now. Not ever. The city's pulse quickened as Friday rolled in, spilling waves of people and traffic into the streets. Sarah arrived at the stables before sunrise, the air sharp and tinged with summer heat, a restless energy already brewing. Her mind replayed Jake's notes and Storm's uncanny instincts. The mystery was growing thicker, and she was certain now. Someone in the city was watching her. Waiting for her next move, she saddled Storm, her hands steady even as her heart pounded. Every interaction between them felt like a small negotiation. Sometimes a step forward, sometimes back. Today, Storm let her cinch the girth without so much as a snort, his dark eyes alert but almost calm. Sarah gave him a gentle scratch behind the ear. "Ready, partner?" Outside, a sergeant waved her down. "Precinct needs a mounted patrol in Central Park. Bunch of tourists complaining about a group of punks." "Captain says you're up." He smirked, like he expected her to fail. Sarah nodded. "We'll take care of it. She led Storm out, sunlight streaking across his black coat. The city felt different from the saddle, more alive, more dangerous. She could see everything from up here, the hurried crowds, the shifty glances, the flash of silver jewelry, and the glint of suspicion in strangers' eyes. She steered Storm through the winding park paths, the morning dew sparkling on the grass. People watched, curious and wary, some recognizing the infamous crazy horse from news stories. A little girl waved. Sarah tipped her hat, forcing a smile. For a moment, it almost felt normal. But tension simmered beneath the surface. They reached Bethesda Fountain and immediately sensed trouble. A group of young men in gang colors loitered by the water, harassing tourists, their laughter loud and mocking. Storm's ears pinned back, he tossed his head, nostrils flaring. Sarah drew a deep breath. This wasn't Texas. She couldn't just outbluff a gang, especially not MS-13, but she wasn't about to back down either. She nudged Storm forward, stopping between the gang and a family of terrified tourists. One of the gang members, a tall kid with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, spat on the ground. "What's this, cowgirl? You think that horse is going to scare us?" Sarah kept her tone even. "Move along. No trouble here today." The snake-tattooed kid sneered, taking a step closer, arms spread wide. "Or what? NYPD thinks they're tough with a rodeo reject and a dumb animal." Storm reared suddenly, hooves slicing the air just inches from the kid's chest. The tourists screamed, scattering. Sarah leaned in, keeping a tight grip on the reins. "Easy, boy, easy." Another gang member flashed a knife, his hand shaking only slightly. The others closed in, eyes full of bravado and something darker. For a split second, Sarah saw herself surrounded, outnumbered, the city pressing in. She swung off the saddle in a single motion, putting herself between Storm and the blade. The kid with the knife grinned, showing gold teeth. "Big mistake, cop." Sarah's mind raced. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes you face the storm head on. If you want trouble, you'll get it. But you're not touching this horse, or anyone else here." The standoff hung in the air, thick as thunderclouds. Then Storm moved, not away, but forward, stepping directly in front of Sarah. His bulk dwarfed her, his ears flat, his body tense and ready. The knife-wielding kid hesitated. For a moment, even the gang members saw what Sarah saw. This horse wasn't afraid of anything. Not men, not knives, not city darkness. The sergeant's voice barked through Sarah's radio. "Backup's on the way. Hold your ground." Suddenly one of the kids broke. "Forget it, man. Let's go. That horse is psycho." The others followed, muttering curses, backing away as Storm stomped the ground, snorting a warning. Sarah's breath came in shudders, adrenaline buzzing through her veins. She stroked Storm's neck, her hands trembling. "You protected me, didn't you? Like you couldn't protect Jake." Storm lowered his head, nuzzling her shoulder. In that moment, the wall between them cracked. Just a little. They were a team now. For real. Within minutes, squad cars screeched onto the scene, officers jumping out, weapons drawn. But the danger had already passed. The tourists slowly drifted back, some snapping pictures, others whispering in awe. The little girl from before ran up, her mother close behind. "Is your horse a hero?" she asked, wide-eyed. Sarah smiled. "He's the bravest partner I've ever had." As the commotion faded, Sarah spotted a security camera mounted on a nearby lamppost, its red light blinking. She felt a chill. Had someone seen everything? The gang hadn't acted alone. It was too organized, too targeted. Back at the precinct, Sarah filed her report, recounting the confrontation. O'Brien listened from his desk, shaking his head. "You got lucky, Mitchell. Next time, backup might not be so close." Sarah met his gaze, defiant. "Storm saved my life. He chose to protect me. That's not luck." O'Brien hesitated, as if wanting to argue, but he turned away. Sarah saw something change in his posture. A grudging respect, maybe. Or at least a lessening of the hostility. Hours later, in the captain's office, Vasquez reviewed security footage from the park. She paused, zooming in on a frame showing a man handing an envelope to the gang leader, an hour before the random encounter. Her jaw tightened, $5,000. Someone paid them to test you and your horse, Mitchell. Sarah's blood ran cold. Test us? Why? Someone's studying you, Vasquez replied. They want to see how Storm reacts under pressure, and they've got inside information about our patrol routes. We've got a leak. A bitter silence settled between them. Sarah stared at her hands, replaying the scene. The knife, the threat, Storm's fearless intervention. Back in the stables, Sarah brought Storm a carrot, letting her hands linger on his mane. They're watching us, boy. They know more than we do. But they don't know you. Not really. She thought about Jake, about the corruption he'd uncovered, and the secret training he'd given Storm. It all made sense now. The aggression, the focus, the loyalty. Storm wasn't just a police horse. He was the key to a secret only she and Jake understood. As the sun set, Sarah walked Storm in the empty paddock, the city skyline glowing gold in the distance. For the first time, she felt a surge of hope, a fragile thing, but real. Whatever storm was coming, they would face it together. But in a parked car across the street, the watcher adjusted their camera, lens trained on Sarah and Storm, recording every move. A text message pinged. Behavior pattern confirmed. Begin phase 2. Sarah glanced up at the city lights, unaware of the eyes tracking her. She whispered to Storm, "We're not alone out here," but neither are they. Somewhere, deep within the NYPD, a leak threatened everything. Trust would be hard to come by. But Sarah and Storm had finally found it in each other. And that, she hoped, would be enough to survive what came next. The tension in the air around the precinct was thick enough to cut with a knife. News of the Central Park incident spread quickly, and for the first time, Sarah noticed the glances from her colleagues were mixed with curiosity, not just skepticism. Some nodded respectfully as she led Storm through the courtyard. Others simply stared, whispering under their breath. She'd gone toe-to-toe with gang members and survived. All thanks to a horse nobody wanted to touch just a week ago. But Sarah didn't care about gossip. All that mattered was the burning question twisting in her gut. Why had that gang targeted her and Storm? The footage Vasquez uncovered gnawed at her thoughts. A deliberate setup, a test, orchestrated by someone with both money and inside knowledge of police routes. And why was Storm so central to it all? Determined to get answers, Sarah went straight to the NYPD forensics lab after her shift. She brought along the residue samples she'd collected from both crime scenes, the sticky, faintly pine-scented varnish Storm had been so fixated on. The lab was a different world, humming fluorescent lights, rows of microscopes, the sharp tang of chemicals. Sarah knew she was an outsider here too, but she pushed through, cornering a tired-looking technician named Ron. "Detective Mitchell," Ron said, raising an eyebrow. "Heard about Central Park. You're making friends all over town." He grinned, but she could see the respect in his eyes. "I need your best work on these samples," Sarah said, pushing the evidence bags across the counter. "Focus on organic compounds, especially anything art-related. The horse, Storm, keeps finding these spots at every scene." Ron whistled softly. "You're saying the horse is your chemical detector now?" "Laugh all you want," Sarah replied, folding her arms. "But he found this stuff twice before forensics did, and I have a feeling he's onto something the rest of us are missing." Ron agreed to rush the tests, intrigued by the challenge and by the strange legend now growing around Storm. Sarah returned to the stables, anxious energy running through her. Storm was waiting, head poking over the stall door, eyes sharp and intelligent. She pulled up a stool and began to brush him in long, slow strokes, talking quietly. "You knew what was out there. You knew before any of us. Jake taught you more than tricks, didn't he? He made you a partner, not a tool." For a while, she just let herself enjoy the quiet. The sound of Storm's breathing, the gentle rhythm of brushing, the faint smell of hay. In those moments, the chaos of the city faded away. She found herself thinking of Texas nights, the wide-open silence, the certainty that came from knowing who you were and where you belonged. It was so different here. But maybe, just maybe, she was starting to belong after all. Her phone vibrated, dragging her back to the present. It was Ron from the lab. "Mitchell," his voice crackled, excitement barely contained. "That residue? Dammer varnish? But at a purity level I've never seen. This is custom blended, not store-bought. Also, there are trace elements used in modern forgery techniques. MIT just published a study showing horses can detect chemicals at parts per trillion. But your horse, he's picking up concentrations 100 times lower than anything I've seen documented. He's not just a detector, he's a scientific phenomenon." Sarah felt a jolt of pride. "I need you to run one more test. Cross-reference the chemical signature with anything logged in our evidence room. If the varnish was ever handled by someone on the inside, I want to know." Ron promised results by morning. Sarah ended the call, mind whirring. Storm nuzzled her shoulder as if sensing her anticipation. "You're not just finding clues, are you, boy? You're trying to stop something before it happens. Like with Jake." The next day dawned with heavy rain, making the city feel washed and raw. Sarah dressed quickly, raincoat pulled tight, and hurried to the precinct. Ron greeted her at the door with a look of triumph. "You were right," he said, handing her a printout. "There's a match in the evidence log. 2 weeks ago, a jar of Damar varnish was signed out for testing by someone using a forged badge number. It was never returned. Only someone with clearance could pull that off." Sarah's heart pounded. So the forger isn't just a criminal. He's a cop, or at least he's working with one. Ron nodded. "There's more. We checked security footage. The forger's badge number matches a technician who's been on paid leave for months. Someone is using his identity to move evidence in and out." Sarah's mind raced. An inside job. Corruption winding all the way through the department. That explained why the thieves were always a step ahead, why the gang had known exactly where she'd be in the park. She felt a wave of dread. If this network went as deep as she feared, nobody was safe, least of all her and Storm. She briefed Captain Vasquez, who swore and slammed her fist on the table. "Damn it, that means someone close to us is in on it." And they're getting bolder. The next move could come any day. Vasquez called an emergency meeting, pulling in a small circle of trusted officers. O'Brien among them. For the first time, he looked at Sarah without open hostility, just worry. "They're painting a target on your back," he said quietly. "Be careful." Sarah nodded. "I can handle myself. But I'm not the one they're really after. They want Storm. He's the only one who can find what they're hiding." That afternoon, the FBI arrived to set up a surveillance network, covering every major gallery and museum in the city. Sarah worked alongside them, going over patrol routes, reviewing staff records, and prepping Storm for a new kind of search. The FBI's profiler, a tall, hawk-faced woman from D.C., reviewed Jake's old case notes with Sarah. "Your horse's abilities," she said, almost grudgingly impressed, "go beyond anything our K9S can do. You realize that if you're right, this could change forensic science, but it also makes you and Storm a liability. Be ready for pushback, from both sides." Sarah spent the evening in the stables, walking Storm through a new set of tests with the FBI techs. She hid vials of Damar varnish, traces of forgery materials, even old evidence tags. Storm found every single one, nuzzling the exact spot until Sarah marked it. The FBI agents watched in amazement. One muttered, "He's like a bloodhound with hooves." By the time the sun set, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied. She leaned against Storm, feeling his warmth. "You're not just a detector. You're trying to save lives," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Storm blinked slowly, resting his head on her shoulder. The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the stable door. O'Brien stepped inside, face grim. "Sarah, we found another match. The signature on the evidence log. It was used again, just last night. Whatever's coming, it's happening soon." Sarah nodded, steel settling into her bones. "Then we'll be ready. This time, they won't get away." But as she left the stables, her nerves prickled. She knew she'd just painted a target on herself and Storm, and the game was about to turn deadly. The city's shadows seemed to stretch longer as she walked back to her apartment, every noise sharper, every light flickering with threat. Sarah lay awake that night, heart pounding, replaying every clue. Storm's loyalty, Jake's sacrifice, the rot hiding inside the department. She couldn't trust anyone, except the horse who'd become her partner in the truest sense. She made a silent promise. No matter what happened, she wouldn't back down. Outside, a car idled in the rain. The watcher raised a phone to his ear. She's close. Too close. You want me to handle it? A pause, then a voice, smooth and cold. Wait. One more mistake, and she's finished. Make sure she doesn't live to tell the tale. Sarah stared out at the storm beyond her window, a silent vow burning in her chest. No one was going to break this partnership. Not the darkness, not the city, not even the traitors inside her own house. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin in earnest. It was just after midnight when Sarah's phone buzzed, jolting her awake. She sat up, adrenaline immediately pumping, and grabbed the phone from the nightstand. A single message from Captain Vasquez, FBI profiler in. All hands on deck at 0700. New intel. This is big. Sarah didn't sleep after that. She got up, dressed in silence, and sat at the small table by her apartment's window, watching the city lights flicker through a thin sheet of rain. Her thoughts spun. Storm's abilities, the missing varnish, the internal leak, the forgeries, the network that had killed Jake, and the sense that whatever happened next would change everything. By sunrise, she was at the stables, finding Storm already restless, pacing in his stall. The usually stoic horse was on edge, whinnying at shadows, muscles bunched as if bracing for a race he couldn't see. Sarah stroked his mane, whispering quietly, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we do this together. The precinct's briefing room was packed. FBI agents filled half the seats, led by Special Agent Mallory Price, the profiler from D.C., all sharp edges, intense eyes, and a reputation for never missing a pattern. Vasquez was there, tight-lipped. O'Brien leaned against the wall, arms crossed, gaze softer now, tinged with worry for Sarah. Agent Price started briskly. The thefts are connected. Professional art forger, European ties. This is not local. We know the next hit will be soon. We have a 48-hour window, at most. Surveillance is already in place at every major gallery and museum. We will rotate patrols and use all resources available. Sarah caught the profiler's eye. You're looking for a pattern, but the only constant is Storm. Jake figured it out before he died. Storm isn't just sniffing varnish, he's identifying a signature. Every crime scene, every residue, is like a calling card. The room went silent. Price nodded. We're aware of the horse's talents. That's why you're being looped in on every new alert. But be careful, Mitchell. Whoever killed Rodriguez won't hesitate to do it again. O'Brien added, Sarah, Storm's not himself lately. You need to be careful out there. Sarah looked down, worry gnawing at her. Storm had been more skittish by the day. She wondered if he sensed the danger, if the trauma from Jake's death was resurfacing now that the stakes were high again. After the meeting, Sarah led Storm outside for some air. He pawed the ground anxiously, sweat beading under his black coat. Easy, boy. Easy. She pressed her forehead to his. We're so close, aren't we? You feel it too? She took him on a slow circuit around the precinct yard, letting him stretch his legs. Several officers watched, whispering about the miracle horse. But Sarah tuned them out. Storm's entire body was tense. He jerked his head at every movement, flinched at passing sirens. When she tried to get him to eat, he refused, lips tight, eyes wild. O'Brien joined her outside, offering a carrot that Storm ignored. He's in rough shape, O'Brien said quietly. When Jake got close to the truth, Storm started acting like this, too. It's like he knows when trouble's coming. Sarah nodded. He won't quit. Neither will I. But We need to move fast, Tommy. The network knows we're onto them. They're not just stealing paintings anymore. They're covering up Jake's last case. O'Brien's face hardened. The painting from Jake's file, Las Meninas, Picasso's study, was scheduled for relocation this week. What if that's the next target? Sarah's pulse raced. That's why they're pushing now. If they destroy the evidence, Jake's case dies for good. And so do we. Back in the squad room, Sarah and O'Brien pored over Jake's case notes, cross-referencing them with the FBI's intel. Storm lay at their feet, occasionally twitching in his sleep, flanks shuddering as if reliving old nightmares. A break came just after noon. The FBI's technical team intercepted a message from the forger's suspected handler, a coded transmission, barely decrypted in time. The message was clear. Hit is imminent. Target is Rodriguez's last investigation. All evidence must disappear. Sarah's blood ran cold. It's happening. They're going after Las Meninas. They killed Jake to keep him quiet. Now they want to erase the rest. Agent Price ordered an immediate escalation. Plainclothes officers inside every museum, cameras reviewed in real time, patrols doubled. But the sense of impending disaster hung heavy. As night crept in, Sarah found herself back in the stables, sitting quietly with Storm. The city outside was restless, a constant hum, a million stories unfolding in the darkness. She wrapped a blanket around Storm, whispering, "I know you're scared. I am too. But we finish what Jake started." A sudden crash echoed outside, a trash can knocked over, a shadow flickering. Storm surged up, muscles tight, ears back. Sarah's heart slammed in her chest. She peered out, hand on her taser, but saw nothing except the glint of headlights disappearing around the corner. She sat with Storm until his breathing slowed. "They're coming for us, but we're ready." Later, back at her apartment, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her. She drew the blinds, double-checked the locks, and sat up late with her father's old service pistol on the table beside her. The phone buzzed with constant updates, FBI units in place, surveillance feeds rolling, no sign of movement yet. She barely slept. Each time she dozed off, she dreamt of Storm galloping through a burning museum, paintings crashing down around them, Jake's voice calling out from somewhere in the smoke. "Find the truth, Sarah. Protect him." At 4:23 a.m., her phone buzzed again. Alert. Guggenheim alarm triggered. Suspected break-in. Las Meninas room. All units respond. Sarah was already in her uniform, pulling on her boots as the dispatcher's voice came over the radio. "Mounted unit, report in. Detective Mitchell, you're closest. Take the south entrance. FBI teams inbound." She raced to the stables, Storm already on his feet, pacing, sensing the urgency. She saddled him quickly, whispered, "This is it, boy. Jake's case. We ride together." Storm whinnied, nostrils flaring as if he understood every word. The ride through pre-dawn city streets was a blur, red lights ignored, sirens wailing in the distance, her breath fogging in the cold. When she arrived at the Guggenheim, chaos reigned. Police tape, flashing lights, armed agents converging from every direction. She swung off Storm, leading him toward the museum's loading dock. O'Brien caught up, his own badge flashing. "SWAT's inside. They say it's bad. Real bad." Sarah steeled herself, hand on Storm's neck. "We're ready." Inside, security guards rushed them down the twisting ramps. The door to the Las Meninas room hung open, alarms shrieking. The priceless painting was gone. But on the floor, a fresh smear of Damar varnish glistened, almost invisible. Storm lunged, nose pressed to the spot, snorting and stomping. Sarah's eyes widened. "He's tracking. The thief didn't get far." O'Brien radioed the team. "Suspect on foot, headed west. We've got a live track. Follow the horse." The hunt was on. Storm, despite his exhaustion and fear, led Sarah and O'Brien through a labyrinth of corridors, out into the night, every muscle quivering with purpose. Behind them, agents and officers raced to keep up. Somewhere ahead, the forger and Jake's killer ran with the painting and the last piece of evidence that could destroy the network. As Storm carried Sarah into the darkness, She felt the storm inside him, the anxiety and the courage, the pain and the hope. For the first time, she truly understood. They weren't just partners by circumstance. They were partners by choice. Tonight, they would face the danger together, no matter the cost. The real fight was just beginning. 3:47 a.m. The Guggenheim's sleek white spiral rose like a ghost against the city's bruised sky. Flashing lights washed over the museum's facade, cutting through the drizzle. Sarah, breath coming in short bursts, felt every nerve on fire. Storm stood beside her, sweat slick on his coat, eyes huge and wild. This was it. Jake's case, the painting that started it all. O'Brien jogged up, earpiece in, face drawn and tense. Suspect still inside, moving fast, SWAT sweeping the upper floors. Security footage flagged a masked man heading for the rear exit. Big guy, European build. Sarah's mind raced as she scanned the chaos. We need to cut him off before he gets to the street. Storm's picking up the varnish trail, and he's never been wrong yet. O'Brien nodded, pulling his Glock and radioing the team. Mitchell's horse has the scent. Back entrance. Go. Storm, nostrils flaring, surged forward, nearly dragging Sarah as they raced through the service corridor. Police officers parted for them, some shouting, "That's the crazy horse!" As Sarah pushed past, tunnel vision, her boots clattered on the polished floor, heart hammering. Storm led the way with laser focus, tail streaming, hooves pounding. The trail zigzagged past loading crates and stacks of bubble-wrapped art, down a ramp, out a side door. In the alley behind the museum, rain slicked the pavement, reflecting emergency lights like broken glass. A van idled at the curb, engine running. As Sarah and Storm burst through the doorway, the rear doors of the van flew open. A hulking figure, face obscured by a balaclava, hefted a long, flat crate, the unmistakable outline of a stolen masterpiece. He turned, eyes narrowing when he saw Storm. The man, Kozlov, Sarah realized with a jolt, the forger Jake had been tracking, lifted a pistol, firing 2 quick shots at the ground between them. Storm reared, but Sarah kept her grip tight, her own weapon drawn. "NYPD, put it down now." Kozlov only grinned, the cruel curve of his mouth visible beneath the mask. He fired again, bullets whining off the metal dumpster, and then shoved the crate into the hands of a smaller accomplice. "Split!" he barked in accented English. The accomplice bolted toward the van, while Kozlov sprinted in the opposite direction, straight into the tangled alleys. For one breathless moment, Sarah hesitated. O'Brien's voice crackled in her ear. Follow the art or follow the killer? The choice clawed at her, but Storm made it for her, jerking his head after Kozlov, muscles bunched and ready. Sarah gave chase, trusting her partner. Kozlov vaulted a fence, racing through puddles, his footsteps echoing off brick walls. Sarah and Storm leapt the fence after him, splashing through the narrow back streets. Kozlov fired wildly over his shoulder, glass shattering somewhere behind them, but Storm didn't flinch. Sarah's pulse thundered as they closed the gap. She glimpsed Kozlov's face, pale, scarred, eyes wild with desperation. Not just a thief. This was the man who'd murdered Jake. Suddenly, Kozlov ducked through a narrow gap between 2 dumpsters. Storm hesitated, too big to follow. Sarah slid off his back, gun drawn, and squeezed into the alley. The world went small and close. Dripping pipes, graffiti, the stink of garbage and fear. She heard Kozlov's boots clatter ahead, then silence. She moved carefully, heart pounding, a flash of movement. Kozlov spun, slamming her against the wall. She felt the gun wrenched from her grip. For a second, the world tilted. She saw Jake's face, Storm's terrified eyes. No! With all her strength, Sarah drove her knee into Kozlov's stomach. He grunted, staggered. She scrambled for her weapon, but he kicked it away, drawing a wicked-looking knife. "You should have stayed in Texas," he hissed. "This city eats cowgirls alive." Sarah faced him, every muscle screaming. "You killed Jake Rodriguez. You won't get away with this." She feinted left, then right, dodging the blade. Storm's whinny echoed from the street, desperate. She took a risk, darting past Kozlov, slamming her shoulder into his ribs. He stumbled, giving her just enough space to dive for her gun. But Kozlov was fast. He was on her in a heartbeat, wrestling for control. Rain slicked their hands as they struggled, both panting, teeth bared in effort and rage. Sarah managed to elbow him in the face, drawing blood. Kozlov roared, slamming her head against the wall. Spots danced in her vision. Storm screamed outside, hooves striking the pavement in frantic bursts. Suddenly, a flash of black barreled into the alley. Storm, having forced his way through the gap, wild-eyed and snorting. He reared up, hooves crashing dangerously close to Kozlov's head. For an instant, Kozlov faltered, and Sarah seized her chance. She drove her fist into his jaw, knocking him back, then leveled her gun at his chest. "Don't move. It's over, Kozlov. NYPD." Her voice cracked, raw with exhaustion and fury. He laughed, blood trickling down his chin. "You think you win? You win nothing? Too late, cowgirl. Network already gone, painting already sold." Sarah blinked, uncertain, gun steady. "Where is it? Who's your contact in the department?" Kozlov only spat at her feet. "You ask your captain, or your friend O'Brien. Not everyone is who they seem." Before she could respond, O'Brien and 2 SWAT officers stormed into the alley, weapons raised. "Hands where we can see them," O'Brien barked. Kozlov smiled, raising his hands, eyes full of cold triumph. They cuffed him, reading his rights. Sarah slumped against the wall, adrenaline draining out of her. Storm nudged her, soft and worried, and she pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "We did it, boy." The morning dragged on in a blur, statements, evidence, the chaos of half a dozen agencies fighting over jurisdiction. The Las Meninas study was still missing, stolen by Kozlov's accomplice. But for now, the man who killed Jake Rodriguez was finally behind bars. Sarah stood outside the museum as dawn crept over Manhattan, the city washing clean in the pale light. O'Brien approached quietly. "You all right?" She nodded, tears burning her eyes. "He tried to turn me against you. Said there's still a mole, that this isn't over." O'Brien looked away, jaw clenched. "He's right. We got Kozlov, but the network's still alive. Someone tipped him off. Someone close." Sarah stared out at the city, feeling Storm's weight against her side. The painting was gone, the case far from closed. But she was still standing, still fighting. "We'll find them, Tommy. Jake deserves that. Storm deserves it too." He squeezed her shoulder. "You did good, Mitchell. Jake would be proud." The sun rose over the city, gilding the rooftops. Sarah closed her eyes, exhaustion and relief mingling in her chest. For the first time, she felt hope. She'd faced the man who killed her friend and survived. The battle wasn't over, but she was ready. Inside the museum, as police swept the crime scene, Storm stood sentinel by the ruined doorway, head high, eyes fierce. He knew, somehow, that the worst was yet to come. Somewhere, in the shadows, the network regrouped. The real mastermind watched from afar, already planning the next move. But Sarah, Storm, and O'Brien were ready for them. The war for Jake's legacy and the city's soul had only just begun. The sky above Manhattan was a slate gray, thunder rumbling distantly as dawn gave way to the storm. Sarah barely had time to catch her breath. The victory of capturing Kozlov was already fading. The Picasso study, the last piece of Jake's case, was still missing, and Kozlov's chilling words echoed in her mind. Network already gone. Painting already sold. Inside the Guggenheim, the chaos was relentless. SWAT officers and NYPD detectives swarmed the scene. The press arrived, flashes exploding like lightning outside the taped-off doors. Sarah gave her statement with Storm by her side, barely hearing the questions. Her thoughts ran in frantic loops. Who had the painting now? Was the leak still watching her? What was the next move? O'Brien leaned in, voice low. Accomplice slipped the net. Traffic cams picked up a black Ducati heading downtown at 4:12, matching his build. He's got the painting, and he's moving fast. FBI says he's headed for the harbor. Sarah's gut clenched. If he makes it to the harbor, it's over. He'll be gone before we can blink. O'Brien didn't hesitate. Let's move. SWAT's setting up roadblocks. You and Storm. Can you track him? Sarah nodded, adrenaline burning away her fatigue. Storm's still got the varnish scent. He'll lead us? The streets were waking up, the city humming with tension. Sarah mounted Storm and followed O'Brien's cruiser, sirens splitting the dawn. They raced through Central Park South, past honking taxis and groggy commuters, the city's steel and glass canyons looming on either side. Sarah felt the familiar rhythm between her and Storm. Hooves pounding, her weight balanced, reins tight. She leaned low, eyes scanning the road ahead. Nothing else mattered now. Storm led them to Columbus Circle, pausing only long enough to snort and stomp at a crosswalk. Sarah saw the faint shimmer of tire marks. A motorcycle, still wet with morning rain. She urged Storm forward. "Come on, boy. You know what to do." Suddenly, a burst of engine noise split the air. The Ducati roared into view, weaving recklessly through traffic. The rider hunched low, the Picasso crate strapped to his back. He looked back once, eyes hidden behind a mirrored visor, then gunned the engine, speeding south. O'Brien shouted into his radio, "Suspect in sight, headed down Broadway. Repeat, suspect southbound." Squad cars surged in pursuit, lights flashing. Sarah gave Storm his head, trusting him completely. They launched after the Ducati, cutting through the morning gridlock. Drivers gawked as the huge black horse galloped between lanes, sirens wailing around them. Storm's muscles surged beneath her, hooves sparking on the wet pavement. For 8 wild blocks, the chase was chaos. The Ducati zipped past trucks and cabs, nearly colliding with a city bus. Storm took a shortcut through a pedestrian plaza, Sarah shouting warnings, "Move!" as startled New Yorkers scattered, cell phones raised to record the impossible, a cop on horseback, chasing a motorcycle through Midtown. The Ducati reached a bottleneck at Times Square, swerving hard to avoid an NYPD blockade. The rider drew a gun, firing blindly at a squad car. Glass exploded. Tourists screamed, diving for cover. Sarah's heart lurched. Not again. "I can't lose anyone else." Storm didn't hesitate. He veered down 45th Street, flanking the Ducati, Sarah drawing her weapon as they closed the distance. The rider glanced back, panic flashing in his posture. He fired at them, bullets slamming into a mailbox, ricocheting off metal. Storm shied, but pressed on, Sarah whispering encouragement. "Hang on, partner. We're almost there." The chase veered into Hell's Kitchen, the streets narrowing. The Ducati accelerated, blasting through a red light. O'Brien's voice crackled in Sarah's ear. "Harbor's 5 blocks ahead. He's going for the ferry dock." Then, everything happened at once. The Ducati cut across 3 lanes of traffic, nearly T-boning a delivery truck. Sarah saw her chance. She urged Storm onto the sidewalk, weaving past startled pedestrians, hooves ringing on concrete. The Ducati's engine shrieked as the rider broke for the final stretch. At the corner of 12th Avenue and West 39th, the traffic jammed, horns blaring in a cacophony. The Ducati tried to slip through, but a garbage truck blocked the way. The rider ditched the bike, grabbed the painting, and bolted for the docks on foot. Sarah slid off Storm, gun drawn. "Stay, boy." She dashed after the suspect, feet splashing through puddles. The harbor loomed ahead, gray water, a cluster of speedboats rocking at the pier. The suspect scrambled over a chain-link fence, cutting his hands, never slowing. Sarah followed, every muscle burning, rain stinging her face. She shouted, "NYPD, stop or I'll shoot." But the suspect didn't look back. Storm, ignoring Sarah's command, crashed through the open gate and galloped after them, nostrils flared, eyes wild. For a moment, Sarah feared he'd panic, but he instead fell into stride beside her. Her shadow, her shield. The suspect reached a speedboat, yelling in rapid Russian to a waiting pilot. Sarah raised her gun. "Freeze! Put the painting down!" The suspect spun, pistol in hand. He fired. Bullets tore through the rain. Sarah ducked behind a crate. Storm screamed, shying away, blood blossoming on his shoulder. Time slowed. "Not again! I can't lose him too!" Sarah's mind whirled, panic threatening to drown her, but she gritted her teeth, steeling herself. She rose, returning fire, hitting the gunman in the leg. He collapsed, howling, the painting skittering across the wet dock. O'Brien arrived, weapon drawn, yelling for backup. The speedboat's pilot floored the throttle, speeding away. But the suspect, the one with the Picasso, was down, moaning, clutching his bleeding thigh. Sarah rushed to Storm, heart in her throat. Blood seeped from a deep graze, but he stood firm, trembling, eyes locked on her. "You saved my life. Again." She wrapped her arms around his neck, sobbing. "Don't you dare leave me." Paramedics swarmed the dock, taking the suspect into custody. O'Brien retrieved the painting, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's over, Sarah. We got him. We got Jake's evidence." Sarah sank to her knees, cradling Storm's head. "Stay with me, boy. You're not just my partner. You're my family." The city seemed to slow, the storm outside mirroring the storm in her chest. The impossible choice, art or justice, had nearly cost her everything. She looked up at the flashing lights, the distant sunrise breaking through the clouds. "We did it, Jake," she whispered. "We finished what you started. But please, don't let Storm die now." As the ambulance whisked Storm away, Sarah and O'Brien watched in silence. The case was cracked, the painting recovered, the network exposed, but the cost had been almost too high. In that moment, with sirens fading and rain washing the city clean, Sarah realized that justice always came at a price. And sometimes, the bravest thing was simply refusing to give up. The final reckoning was near, but only if Storm survived to see it. The harbor reeked of gasoline, salt, and the coppery tang of blood. Blue and red lights spun across the pier as the NYPD and FBI teams secured the scene. Sarah was on her knees, arms wrapped around Storm's trembling neck. She barely registered the chaos around her. The echo of sirens, O'Brien barking orders, the thump of boots on slick boards. All she could focus on was the black horse bleeding from his shoulder, sides heaving, eyes cloudy with pain. "Stay with me, boy. Don't you dare leave me." Sarah's hands shook as she pressed her jacket against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "You're the toughest horse I've ever known. We're not done yet." Medics knelt beside her, voices urgent. "We need to get him to the animal hospital, now. You, officer, let go. Let us work." Sarah blinked tears from her eyes, but didn't let go until the last possible moment, whispering, "I'll be right behind you, Storm. Hang on, hang on." O'Brien gripped her shoulder as the animal ambulance roared off into the city, sirens fading. "He'll make it, Sarah. If anyone can, it's that crazy horse." His voice cracked. "You saved a lot of lives today. And you finally got Jake justice." Sarah wiped her face, forcing herself back into the present. The shooter, the accomplice with the Picasso, was cuffed and moaning on the dock, a bullet wound in his leg. The stolen masterpiece, miraculously, was still intact, wrapped in a plastic sheet. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the art or even the criminal anymore. She was thinking about Jake Rodriguez, about the legacy he'd left, and about the animal who'd carried them both through hell and back. She knelt beside the suspect as FBI agents crowded in. He looked up at her, face twisted with pain and hate. You don't understand. You'll never stop it. The network is everywhere." Sarah leaned close, voice low and raw. "It stops tonight. You tell me who's on the inside. Who gave you the badge, the varnish, the route? Tell me, and maybe you'll see a judge before you see a morgue." The man spat blood, eyes defiant. But as the agents led him away, a new voice echoed across the dock, a harsh, accented growl. "He'll say nothing. You have no idea what you're up against, officer." Sarah turned, heart pounding. Kozlov, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals, was being marched toward a waiting car. His hands were cuffed, but his expression was triumphant, not defeated. He locked eyes with her as he passed. "You think this is victory?" Kozlov sneered. "Jake found out about the entire network. Cops, museum directors, buyers in 3 continents. He had to die. And so will you, if you keep digging." O'Brien stepped forward, rage flashing in his eyes. "You're done, Kozlov. We have everything we need. Jake's evidence, your confession. Enjoy prison." But Kozlov only laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed against the metal hulls and black water. "Enjoy your little win, cowgirl. It's not over. It never is." The marshals shoved him into the car, slamming the door. Sarah watched the convoy pull away, a chill settling deep in her bones. She realized she was shaking, anger, grief, exhaustion all at once. The adrenaline of the chase was gone, replaced by a heavy, sick fear. What if Kozlov was right? What if the rot in the department went even deeper? A medic returned, giving her a quick nod. They're prepping your horse for surgery now. The bullet missed anything vital, but it's close. He's a fighter. If you want, you can ride with us to the hospital. Sarah didn't hesitate. Let's go. The ride to the animal hospital blurred by. City lights bleeding past, her mind swirling with memories. Jake laughing in the old training ring. Storm's first nervous nudge, the night she almost quit. The day she realized New York might become home. She prayed, whispered, cajoled, whatever it took. Just, one more miracle, Storm. You pulled me through everything. Now let me pull you through this. At the hospital, as the staff rushed Storm inside, Sarah paced the hallway, O'Brien and Captain Vasquez arriving a few minutes later. The captain was tense, face gray with worry. They just finished the main raid. 12 arrests, 3 department insiders. We got them, Sarah. Jake's case will finally see the light. Sarah nodded, but couldn't feel relief yet. Not while Storm was fighting for his life in a room filled with bright lights and strangers. She pressed her palms to her eyes, remembering Jake's words. Sometimes, you gotta ride into the storm, not away from it. O'Brien joined her on the bench, voice rough. You did what no one else could. Not just with Jake's case. With Storm. He was just a tool to everyone else. You made him a hero. Sarah tried to smile, but the tears spilled over anyway. I don't care about medals, Tommy. I just want him to wake up. Hours crawled by. The city moved on, indifferent to the pain inside that waiting room. Dawn crept over the skyline, painting the city gold. Finally, a vet emerged, mask dangling from one ear. He's out of surgery. Weak, but stable. You can see him, just for a minute. Sarah rushed inside, heart in her throat. Storm lay on a thick blanket, an IV in his neck, eyes glazed but aware. He nickered softly as she knelt beside him, brushing his mane with trembling hands. Hey there, partner. You scared the hell out of me, she laughed, the sound breaking into sobs. We did it, boy. You saved the city. You saved me. Storm blinked, his breathing slow but steady. For a long moment, Sarah just sat there, soaking in the miracle. O'Brien and Vasquez stood at the door, silent, letting her have this small victory. The vet crouched beside her. He needs rest. A lot of it, but he's strong. I think he'll pull through. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. He always does. Before she left, she leaned in and whispered, We finished Jake's case. They can't hurt you anymore. Or me. Or anyone. Rest now, hero. I'll be right here. As she stepped outside, the city was bright and new. Jake's killer was in custody. The corruption exposed. Storm alive. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah let herself believe in hope again. But deep down, she knew the war wasn't truly over. There were always more shadows, more storms on the horizon. She squared her shoulders, ready for whatever came next. Jake's legacy would live on, not just in the halls of justice or the files of the NYPD, but in the unbreakable bond between a lost cowgirl and her legendary horse. And in that golden New York morning, that was enough. 6 months later, New York City shimmered under a mellow autumn sun. The chill in the air was edged with promise rather than foreboding. Leaves drifted down on Central Park's winding paths, and people paused to watch the spectacle of color. It was a different city now. Or perhaps Sarah Mitchell was simply seeing it through different eyes. On a crisp afternoon, the NYPD mounted unit gathered for a special ceremony at the center of Central Park. News vans lined the entrance, crowds formed, eager to catch a glimpse of the black thoroughbred who had, as headlines across the country proclaimed, saved the city and cracked $1 million ring. Sarah stood in her dress uniform, the heavy blue coat perfectly pressed, her badge gleaming in the soft sunlight, but all she could focus on was Storm. The stallion looked magnificent, his once ragged coat glossy, a fresh pink scar etched across his shoulder, a badge of survival, not defeat. His dark eyes sparkled with intelligence and warmth. Storm nuzzled Sarah's palm as if to say, "We made it." Captain Vasquez stood at the microphone, voice ringing with pride. "We honor not just our officers, but the remarkable partnership that brought down a criminal network stretching from here to Europe. Officer Sarah Mitchell, your courage and integrity, along with the loyalty of your extraordinary partner, represent the very best of this department." Applause swelled as Vasquez pinned the NYPD Medal of Honor onto Sarah's coat. The crowd cheered, but Sarah barely heard them. She stepped forward, a quiet smile on her lips, and accepted a garland of blue and white flowers for Storm, who wore it with regal patience. O'Brien winked at her from the front row, metal gleaming on his own chest. He mouthed, "Told you so." Storm, after months of grueling surgery and physical therapy, stood tall beside Sarah. The city had followed every step of his recovery. There were front-page stories, TV crews outside the animal hospital, and donations pouring in from around the world to help fund new equipment for the NYPD's mounted unit. Storm had become a symbol of courage and redemption, a living legend. But for Sarah, the true healing had been quieter, more personal. The chaos of the investigation, the long nights haunted by fear, had faded. In their place was something new: acceptance, pride, even joy. She'd found a home not just in the city, but in herself. As the crowd dispersed, a young girl approached, her hand tightly gripping her father's. "Officer Mitchell, can I pet Storm?" Sarah knelt down, smiling. "Of course. He loves meeting new friends." Storm lowered his head gently, letting the girl stroke his mane. The girl's father snapped a picture, gratitude shining in his eyes. Sarah felt the simple peace of the moment settle over her. Later, at the reception, O'Brien found her, by the fountain, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You did it, Sarah. You finished what Jake started." She accepted the coffee, her smile tinged with bittersweet memory. "Couldn't have done it without you. Or Storm. Or Jake. Really." O'Brien's gaze softened. "I talked to the DA. With all the arrests, the confessions, and Jake's files, the case is rock solid. No more cover-ups. The FBI is still sifting through the international connections, but this city is clean again. For now." Sarah nodded. She looked over at Captain Vasquez, deep in conversation with a cluster of city officials. "How's the department holding up?" "Better than you'd think. People are rattled, but most are grateful it's out in the open. The honest ones, anyway. They look at you and Storm and remember what we're supposed to stand for." O'Brien's smile grew mischievous. "And rumor is, recruitment's up 20%. Everyone wants to join the Mounted Miracle Squad." Sarah laughed. The sound was clear and bright, not weighted down by grief or fear. "Maybe next year we'll have to train a whole cavalry. Just don't let anyone else ride Storm," O'Brien said. "He's got his favorite partner already." That evening, the precinct hosted a memorial service for Jake Rodriguez. The brass band played softly as officers and friends shared stories. Funny, sad, heroic. Jake's mother was there, her eyes filled with tears but also pride. Sarah spoke simply, her words honest. "Jake was a brother to all of us. He believed in this city. He never gave up, even when it cost him everything. I owe him my life. And so does Storm." She placed a bouquet of bluebonnets and sunflowers, Texas and New York, together, on the memorial plaque. The city's sunset caught the golden letters, and for the first time, Sarah felt the burden lift. Jake could rest now. Justice had finally caught up. The weeks rolled by, Storm returned to active duty, and Sarah with him. Their patrols through Central Park became something of an event, tourists waving, joggers pausing to say hello, parents pointing out the hero horse to wide-eyed children. Storm soaked up the attention, but Sarah knew he was happiest in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them, walking the park's hidden paths, the city humming softly around them. Sometimes O'Brien joined their rounds, cracking jokes, and pointing out hot dog carts he insisted were run by the the best in New York. Other times, Sarah rode alone, talking to Storm about everything and nothing. She told him stories about Texas, about her father and rodeo summers, about fear and hope, and how sometimes the thing you're running from turns out to be the thing you need most. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Sarah dismounted and let Storm graze in a quiet meadow. She leaned against his side, arms folded, and looked out over the city. "We did it, boy. Jake can rest now, and so can we." Storm nuzzled her gently, breath warm against her cheek. For a long, peaceful moment, they watched the city together. Partners, survivors, whole. As the light faded, Sarah mounted up. She and Storm trotted toward the heart of Central Park, their silhouettes long and proud on the golden grass. She smiled, feeling hope for the first time in years. Sometimes the most broken souls find each other and become whole. Sarah and Storm had proved that trust, courage, and justice could overcome any darkness. Jake's legacy lived on through them, through every hoofbeat on the city's pavement, every smile they inspired, every act of kindness and courage that rippled outward. And as they disappeared into the evening light, New York watched and remembered. True heroes don't just chase the storm. They ride through it and come out stronger on the other side.